Why are people registered as Democrat or Republican? One significant cultural difference between the UK and the US is that Americans are often registered as Democrats or Republicans. Why do people do this? I have never heard of a British person being registered as a Labour or Conservative supporter, and in general people are often, although not always, keen to keep their political preferences private. The political parties are private entities. They are not established by the government. Unlike in parliamentary systems, our coalitions are formed during primaries. In many states, in order to vote in the primaries for the candidate you want to represent your party, you need to be registered with the party. People focus way too hard on the end of the political race, especially as foreigners who are on the outside looking in. The real movement in policy and direction happens during the primaries and more local elections. Who you vote for president in many cases matters a lot less than who you vote for in the primaries. Also going to point out that each state has their own primary rules. Some states you don't need to be a party member to vote in the primary, but can only vote in one party's primary. Some states you can register with a party or switch parties the day of the primary election. Some states require you to be registered for a certain amount of time. Regardless, your party affiliation does not matter on general election day. A registered Republican can vote Democrat at the general election, and vice versa. You can also vote for Republicans for some positions and Democrats for others. If I wanted to vote for a Democrat for president but a Republican for Senate, that is a totally fine thing to do. In general elections, we vote for people, not parties. Here in Washington, all races outside the presidential race are essentially nonpartisan. Top 2 vote-getters in the primary election get on the general election ballot regardless of party. Oh, and we've been 100% mail-in ballots for more than a decade. It's nice to have the time to do a little research on candidates before giving them a vote. In Texas, mail-in voting is severely restricted, but the county websites have sample ballots for each precinct, so like you. I also do research on the candidates before going to the polls. I make my decisions and then bring them with me to the polling place on a small piece of paper. There are also things like the nonpartisan voting guides from the League of Women Voters, which is available in every state. Oregon also does mail-in, and I absolutely love it. In fact, Oregon was the first one to go to all-mail elections for both primaries and general federal elections in 1995-1996. California was the first to do excuse-free absentee ballots, though way back in 1978. 8 states, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, Vermont, and Washington, and the District of Columbia, allow all elections to be conducted entirely by mail. I hope Good Space Guy makes it past the primaries this year. Not because he's a good choice, but because it would make me LOL. I wish that was a thing nationwide, and CT having national parties represented in local elections is the worst. We end up with people running on a ticket for or against policies that have nothing to do with local governance. I've seen CT politicians argue culture war bullshit just because they have an R or a D in front of their name, when we really need people who are debating the specific things that need to be dealt with in CT, not nationwide. In Pennsylvania, you do need to register as Democrat or Republican to vote in primaries. I was once registered independent, but changed it because I couldn't vote in certain elections. I currently am an independent, but that's because it didn't matter this year. Trump had already won the nomination by the time we came around, so no use in switching to Republican to vote for someone else. And Biden was the incumbent. I'm 24, so I haven't had a lot of voting, but my plan is basically just switch to whatever party has a close race in the primary and vote for who I think is better. Or if both are like that, just switch to the one and vote for who I would vote for in the general. That's why I ended up registering as Republican when I turned 18. I was going to go with a third party. I figured I'm going to vote for who I think is best, regardless of their party, so it didn't really matter who I registered as. Might as well do something different. But then Dad warned me I might not get to vote too often in the spring due to closed primaries. Both parents are Democrats, so I figured it would be one last teenage rebellion moment and filled in the bubble next to Republican. 99.99% of the time I favor the Democrat side, especially of late. I've thought of switching a few times, but that'd require effort Googling what form I needed, filling it out and mailing it in. And other than being able to fill in the circle next to Joe Biden rather than filling in the circle under Donald Trump, next to write in and filling in Joe Biden, nothing much would change so. Plus, I live with a registered Democrat, so we get campaign material from both sides. Great way to see what each team is saying and being more well-informed. and it's always fun when I get randomly selected by the state or country Republicans to fill out a survey. I'm sure they likely throw mine out thinking it was a joke, but if the off chance I might tone down their rhetoric and them focused on actually helping people again. Here in Missouri, when we register to, there is no party selection. On primary elections, we ask for a ballot by the political party we want to participate in the primary election for. It will only have Republican or Democratic Party primary candidates on it the ballot, so you can't vote in more than one party's primary, but all other ballot questions are the same on all ballots. In rural or traditionally red areas, how you get Democrats registering as Republican. Good way to help the saner Republicans get a chance at the local level. Also, we usually only have 1 or 0 Democrats running in most local elections. Also going to point out that each state has their own primary rules. And then there's Washington, where party registration affiliation isn't required at all. You can vote for whomever you like in both the primary and general elections. That's much better than having to register. I wonder why all states don't just do that. This year in WA, we had a jungle primary for governor. The incumbent is not running again. Our voters pamphlet just has candidates state which party they prefer. We had 28 candidates on the primary ballot for governor. Among the preferred parties, prefers Republican Party, prefers Democratic Party, prefers Independent Party, prefers Stand-Up. American Party prefers Green Party, prefers Libertarian Party states. No party preference, prefers Trump. Republican Party prefers nonsense. Busters, Party prefers nonpartisan party. It seems like it would open the door up to even more gamification in the primaries. For example, you could vote for the worst candidate in an opposing party's primary so that your party's candidate has a better chance of winning in the general election. Then you'd see a huge increase in all sorts of convoluted efforts by opposing campaigns to promote weaker candidates for the other side. There's positives and negatives for sure, but I'm not convinced that would serve the general public in a net positive way. This does happen. I don't remember ever hearing anyone talk about it before the 2016 primaries, but I remember that year. It was definitely something you heard people discussing, debating in my state, since we don't register a party. In Virginia, you don't have to register a party. For primaries, you can only vote in one, but it can be whichever one you want. Massachusetts is like that. When I turned 18, I registered as an independent, only so I could vote in all primaries. You still can only request one or the other ballet when it's time, so I decided to pick Republicans' pastime so I could not vote for Trump. Not like it really matters here, but I wanted one less vote for him to even be the nominee. In Mass, if you aren't enrolled in a party, you can vote in any primary. If you are enrolled in a party, you can only vote in that party's primary. I have lived in only these kind of states. There are no registered political people outside of asking for a specific primary ballot. That's it. You show up, tell them the party ballot you want for your primary, and you're done. Party affiliation doesn't really matter in the election here in Europe either, for a voter. You can vote for different parties in nation, regional, and local elections, and if you're a member of a party, it still doesn't have to be your own party in either of these. Can you vote who for is the party nominee for an election? Assuming there's only one nominee for a party. Or do you otherwise vote on who ends up in the elections? I can only answer for Sweden here, and in extension the Nordics because our systems are really similar, but the party nominees are decided by party members. I can actually vote for the party nominees because I am a member of a political party and I've been on the ballot multiple times, but I am the minority. In the elections, there are lists for every party with candidates. If I recall correctly, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and possibly Iceland have lists with an order, and you pick one and put in an envelope with the possibility of putting a check mark for your preferred candidate. And if one candidate gets enough votes, they override the list order set by the party and can get elected to one of the open positions, despite being lower on the list. The total number of votes for each party decides the number of seats they get, and the lists decide which candidates get the seats. In Finland, each candidate has a number, and you vote by filling in that number on the ballot. The vote counts both as a party vote, deciding the number of seats, and the candidates for each party getting the highest number of votes get the seats allocated to their party. So there are never just one candidate for a certain constituency. There are multiple candidates for each party. In the parliamentary elections, my constituency has 43 seats in parliament and my own party has 3 of those, for example.